Linings, when do you use them? You always, most fiddlebacks are lined. I wanted to show you this because there's always a question about interlining. This is an interlining. An interlining is this fabric that goes between the main fabric and the lining. This with the lining. This interlining. When do you use it? When don't you use it? I almost never use it, but on this vestment that I'm making, this is a silk velvet, and it's very light and flimsy. And on this, I have this gold, the Celtic cross made out of gold, metallic gold cord, and it's very heavy. This vestment is heavy. This is all metal, and it's and this silk would not be able to support the weight of that metal. So in this case, I put an interlining. Again, this is a case where, and I couldn't use stitch witchery. What I did was I laid it out the way I wanted it, and in each of these joints, I put fabric glue. I put the fabric glue on a plate. I don't just come at it with the fabric glue. I put the fabric glue on a plate, used a straw, picked up some of the glue, slipped it under, pushed down on the trim to hold it, pulled the straw out, and left the little glob of glue under there where it would stick. Then later I went through and basted. You maybe can't see it, but I hand basted first. There's a lot of hand basting stitches. And then I sewed it down with the machine. With the machine I used a walking foot because of the thickness of this metal, and I didn't want it getting caught in the foot, which it would do anyway, but not as much as without a walking foot. So again, this is this type of vestment. This is a shoulder. This meets at the shoulder type, and again, it's thin. So I used the interlining. Let me get this out of the way, and then I'll show you what we're doing today. All right, I'm going to start, normally I start with the back, but I'm going to start with the front because of this thing that we shed at the bottom. This fabric is, for what kind of lining fabrics should you use? I talked this over in the seminar, but in case you couldn't understand it or missed it, don't use velvet. Don't use satin. Satin is a stretchy fabric. But you can get satin taffeta, which has a stiffness to it, which it works much better. I love taffeta as a lining if you want a shiny lining. You can also use broadcloth. There's nothing wrong with it. It makes an excellent lining. It's breathable, comes in a myriad of colors. Anything in the quilting section plus patterns. This time I'm using, actually, because of the color I wanted, I could have gone broadcloth, but I still wanted a little shine. So this is an actual lining fabric, like you get in the suiting section with the linings. It's a nice gold that goes well with the gold on here. Not too drastically different. Again, you don't need an interlining. If you do want to use an interlining, the old vestments were made with linen, coarse linen. Well, they didn't use their fine linen, that went on the altars. But the coarse linen was used for lining, interlining. Of course, even coarse linen is expensive, but they have linen-like fabric in Joann's. Muslin makes a very good interlining. And if your priest is one of the ones who really wants something really heavy, there's always duck, cotton duck. But, because there's some priests who think that if it's not heavy, it's not right. That's wrong. Especially in warm climates, if you're sewing for a priest in Texas or in the South or in Africa or wherever, you want it light as possible. He's got several layers of clothes. So this is going to make a nice light. This will be light, but it should be nice. It should be fine. My iron going off again. All right, I'm going to show you, I have two, for this we use the 1/4 inch stitch witchery. And I'm going to show you with both the stitch witchery and this with the steam seam, the difference, how they both work, and whether it's up to you whether you use one or the other. I generally use the stitch witchery, but the steam seam has some advantages, has some disadvantages too, like everything else. First thing we're going to do is cut it out. We cut the main fabric with no seam allowance. The seam allowance goes in the lining. So the lining will be cut with the seam allowance. And we're going to use for a pattern the vestment itself. So I'm going to put some pins here just to hold it down in place. So, and then I'm going to cut around it. How much seam allowance? You need more than 1/4 inch. You need a 1/2 inch to 1 inch. Now most of that's going to get cut off. It's just how much do you like to work with? How much? You're only going to go back to 1/4 inch seam allowance, but you need more than that to begin with, as you'll see why as we go through this. So you need more than you expect to use. And here on the front only, you need extra wide seam allowance here at the top, about 2 inches. So I'm going to just cut around this, leaving my seam allowance. I'm going to use about 3/4 inch. It's more than I usually use, but and you can go around with a ruler and a chalk and chalk it. It's not going to make any difference in the long run because most of this is going to get cut off. As I said, you only really need 1/4 inch, but we have to start out with more than that. So if some places you have, like I just did here, 1 inch instead of 3/4, cut it back a little bit. It doesn't matter as long as you have at least 1/2 inch. So if some places it's got more than others, it doesn't matter. So it seems to me a waste of time to go around and chalk it. And so I don't do that. I just eyeball it and cut it. All right, the next step is to turn it. Now I would do this in 1 step, well in 2 steps actually, but I suggest people who are starting out making vestments do it with 1. And the first step is to go around and fold. You want to fold the seam allowance up to the raw edge of your fabric. So this is your raw edge here. You're going to fold it up to that raw edge. If you're working with a satin again does not like to fold over, and you may have to hit it a few times to get it to do that. So you're getting this crisp fold at the edge, and that makes it easier for you to put the stitch witchery exactly where you want it. And that's why I suggest when you first start making vestments, you do this. I would just put the stitch witchery here and just fold it and do it as 1 step. But I've made a lot of vestments, and I suggest you don't do that for your first ones. Till you become comfortable with stitch witchery and its ways. Now some of these curves you might need to clip, but it doesn't. They seem to be easing around there, so I'm fine. I will have to clip this curve at the bottom. You clip curves so that it will go where you want it to. Might need a little bit right here. And when you clip a curve, in case my iron's in the way, when you clip a curve, you do not clip all the way into the fabric. You stop about 1/8 of an inch away from it. this will bend, this opening, to allow it to go around a curve either one direction or the other, fold over on itself for an inside curve, for an outside curve, and open up for an inside curve. It just gives the fabric a little give. But if you clipped all the way into the main fabric, you would have a hole there. And you want to avoid that. So I want to pull this up a little more and keep going around the bottom here. I can tell by the little tucks that it's putting into it that it wants to be clipped. Usually, as you're going around with stiffer fabric, this is thin lining fabric, you would definitely want to clip curves. And it'll tell you, as you're going, it'll tell you when it needs it. It'll pull up, the fabric will pull up, and you know, well, I need to clip that to get it to go back flat again. Okay, so, and by folding this first, you can see that it's laying right up against the edge. Where if you were putting the stitch witchery in it as you went, you wouldn't see that. It'd be glued. And more often than not, it's glued where you don't want it to be. So, and that's why the young lady, I talked about in the seminar, needed to move her trim at the edge and show, because she got glue in the wrong place. It's basically stitch witchery in the wrong place. This one is not. I like working with thicker fabrics than this one. This is too, if I had this to do over again, if I had time to go back to Joann's and get more lining, I would probably use a cotton broadcloth in this color, because I want this color or something similar to it. I had gold taffeta originally, but I didn't have enough of it, and it was a little darker than I wanted. So I went to Joann's and got this one, but it's a little thinner than I like. It'll be fine for the lining, but it's thin to work with. All right, keep going. And again, as I go around here, you can see how it pulls. That means it needs to be clipped there. And you don't want to clip it all the way in. See, once you get it clipped, it will pull up where it's supposed to. Like that. Don't really need the steam for this, but it doesn't hurt it, and it does help it. Why are you beeping at me? I'm moving you, aren't I? Normally personally, I would move the chair instead of moving the vestment, because I don't like moving a vestment on the table. I like it to stay in one spot so I don't get wrinkles and puckers, but I can't keep moving the camera because I don't have somebody holding it. It's on a tripod, and so I can't move it. All right, so now it's all folded over and it's right at the edge of the main fabric. So now we're going to go back to the beginning again because I'm right-handed. Now you can do this two ways, with the stitch switcher or with the steam-a-seam. I'm going to show you the steam-a-seam first. Steam-a-seam has, or steam-a-seam light, whichever this one is, I'm not sure. It has a paper backing. One side's sticky and the other side has a paper backing. And you put the sticky side down where you want it, which in this case is right at the edge of the main fabric. And you can use your fingers to push it in place because, as I say, it's sticky, it will stay there, which is a nice thing, especially if you're, you know, new to vestment making. And this is where you're working with a very narrow stitch witchery, and it likes to slide out, which is why you end up having your lining glued further out than you want it. So I'm going to go this far, and it breaks off like regular stitch witchery. And then so now you have it down in place where you want it. There's this paper backing that's on it just peels off, if you can get it to start. Usually I don't, if I use this, if I plan to use it for the whole thing, I would, actually it was doing it. It was me trying to get the paper off the paper. When you peel it off, you can see the stitch witchery stuck there. And then you're going to stick this down. Now it's sticky on this side now. So you can stick this down with your fingers. And if you've already pressed this, it should go right where it's supposed to go. See, it's stuck there where it's supposed to be. And then what you do is you hit it with the iron to actually make it, not permanent, but put it in place. And now it is exactly where you want it. And it's right within that 1/4 of an inch of the edge. So if you're really working with a fabric that you don't have a whole lot of seam allowance, it's good to go with this. And if you're new to it or you just like the convenience of it, fine. Regular stitch witcher, you're going to do the same thing, only you have to put it, first of all you have to find the end of it. All right, here's the end of it. Pull this up. You also have all this paper garbage left. That's not a bad thing though. Anyway, you're going to put the stitch witchery right at the edge and fold it over it. And then you have to, so you're going to work in small pieces at a time. Doing this one, steaming that, and then moving on to the next one. And so on around the edge. Okay, not going too fast, keeping it really close. You want it close, really close at the edge, right in that fold. Another advantage of the steam-a-seam is you get in a package of it 2 rolls like this, as opposed to 1 roll of this. I suppose if it does catch on in popularity, the price will probably go up, but it's rather convenient and inexpensive. Okay. So that's the stitch witchery. Again, you get the same effect as the steam seam, right in that quarter of an inch, right at the edge. All right, I'm going back to this one. Now when you get here to the corners where it turns, you might want to take it off in pieces. Do small pieces, otherwise you're going to get, it doesn't, because of the paper backing on it, it doesn't like to make those long turns, these sharp.